Hi everyone, hi ng-conf. I'm really excited that you decided to be a part of this session even though we have so many great talks taking place at the same time. It's amazing, I'm very excited about that. Today I'm going to talk about productivity revolution, more specifically about Angular principles in Node, so how we can take advantage of our Angular experience in Node.js. Before diving into this topic, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Kamil. Yeah, that was great. I'm a co-founder of Trillion.io, the next level software consulting company, and I'm primarily focused on the web-related things. You can find me on Twitter using highlighted Twitter handle, and obviously on the GitHub. Beyond regular day-to-day work, I'm giving the value back to the community as an open source contributor. I'm the creator of Nest.js, which is the fastest rising framework in 2018 for Node.js. And Nest is written entirely in TypeScript and is heavily inspired by Angular, hence that's the reason why I'm here today speaking in front of you. In the last year, we have noted almost 300% growth in the number of GitHub stars, leaving behind any other existing library, all those famous ones like Express, like Koa, and Happy.js, for example. And a week ago, we crossed 15,000 of stars, which is amazing. Anyway, let's start with Angular. I suppose that everyone here is familiar with this technology, and we love Angular, that's why we are here. When looking through the official documentation, we can find the following phrase: Angular is a platform. What does it mean? Generally, Angular provides a lot of things out of the box. We've got declarative templates, dependency injection, testing utilities, CLI, and so on and so on. Lots of useful stuff. Additionally, Angular combines best practices. It integrates them to solve development challenges. It's built on top of few well-known design principles, which in turn properly applied to our software simplifies the process of creating scalable and large systems. But most importantly, Angular gives right abstractions. These abstractions help us organize our code and distribute responsibilities across different building blocks in an efficient way. A huge part of those abstractions are not limited only to the front-end development, though. They also fit any other type of application, including server-side applications. And this is the moment when I would like to introduce Nest to you. So before we start talking about Nest, I would like to ask you a quick question. Who has heard about Nest already? Please raise your hand. Wow, that's awesome, like 50% of the audience. So as we know, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. Think of Nest as a superset of Node. It's a framework for building server-side applications in a very similar syntax as Angular. And thus, Nest, same as Angular, is a platform, but in terms of back-end development, not front-end development. Same as Angular, we are doing our best to empower developers and give them instruments to smoothly build progressive software. What we strive to deliver is a kind of higher level of reusability. So when Node.js came up for the first time, it was considered as an outstanding revolution. Regardless of the whole event-driven architecture, it was extraordinary because you could basically take the code that runs in your browser and execute it locally on your machine, right? Using just Node. Like, if the code was like platform agnostic. And Nest is trying to rise this reusability on an even higher level. First of all, we talk about knowledge reusability. Nest is based on almost the same set of principles as Angular, and therefore you don't have to learn everything from scratch. Modularity, dependency injection, responsibility segregation, decorators, all this is present in Nest as well. Another point is experience reusability. Nest has practically identical API in many places. We believe that you have created lots of great applications in Angular, and it doesn't make sense to force you to learn new language, new syntax, new keywords, new API, right? Why not just reuse this knowledge obtained already? So therefore, Nest API is trying to be as close as possible to the corresponding Angular API. Regardless of the developer experience, so the experience reusability, knowledge reusability, we talk about code reusability. That's a very important point. Let's talk about that. What can we share between front-end and the back-end? First thing, DTO, data transfer object. So every time when you have to transfer some data from your front-end application to the back-end, like in your post request, for example, like create post DTO, update post DTO, whatever, like create cat DTO as well. So this is an example. This might be a Angular service which has a method, create method. This method takes a DTO as a parameter and then pass it down to the HTTP client to perform REST API, HTTP request to our REST API. The same DTO can be used in Nest application just like that. So you can take the same interface, take the same class and shared library, for instance, and you can use it at both sides. You can use it in a front-end application and you can use it in your back-end application. So basically, every time when you update your code, let's say back-end team update your code, update the interface, you have immediate coherence between platforms, right? You no longer have to ask questions on Slack, for example. Hey, did you update it? Did you update the entity because I'm getting errors? You have immediate experience out of the box. The second thing, interfaces. Like we have an entity has few properties. We can reuse the same class between those two platforms, like let's say post. Like it has an identifier, it has a title, it has a description. We can hold it and share it between platforms. So here we have this Angular service which returns an observable which wraps post entity. The same interface can be used in at Nest side. So we can just like return post from our create endpoint. And then if you change something, if you add additional property, it's gonna be immediately available for front-end developers as well. And the last thing, services. You can even share services. You can share validation service. You can share interceptors. Like let's say we have a base interceptor which wraps every response into data property, and then you can share this keyword in a base interceptor, create an Angular interceptor that extends from this interceptor and the Nest interceptor that also extends from the same interceptor. Once you change the keyword, it's gonna apply to both sides at once. So you will no longer have like a breaking change made by the backend team. It's gonna be immediate experience for you. So how can we achieve that? How can we create a monorepo setup? The easiest solution would be to create a directory, then initialize Angular application using Angular CLI, and then scaffold Nest application using Nest CLI, right? That was fairly simple. However, if you are looking for more sophisticated solutions and best practices according to the monorepo development, you can take advantage of Angular console. So basically, Angular console, if you are using Narwhal schematics right now, it allows you to generate node application, which by default is a Nest application within your monorepo like Angular workspace. So you can create multiple Angular applications and multiple Nest applications and share code between them, which is amazing. All right, less theory, more examples and raw knowledge. Let's have a look at the API, frameworks API. We are going to start from building blocks. So let's have a look at modules first of all. At a higher level, modules are used to organize our code and like split features into logical units. Like we have a users module, we have posts module. Every Nest as well as Angular application has at least one module which is considered as a root module used to bootstrap our application. Specifically, the module holds metadata properties. It groups a few essential elements for the module. For the sake of simplicity, I have omitted a couple of properties like entry components here because they do not bring any relevant value in this context. So the declarations property is just a list of declarable classes. We know about that. It's like components, pipes, directives, and so on that belong to this module. Then we've got providers, and providers is just an instruction to the dependency injection system on how to obtain a value for dependency. It might be a class, it might be a factory. Next property, imports. So it's a list of modules that should be imported to this module. It's a kind of API of the module. And the last property, exports. It's a list of declarations that should be available outside of the module. It might be like a public pipe, a public component, and you can decide which components are private and which are public. All right, now we are going to switch to Nest modules. So we have to carry out several modifications. Let's start with declarations. In Nest, we don't have such a notion of a template, of a view. There are no HTML files that user may interact with. So we can get rid of declarations property. However, we still need something like an entry point to our system that user may use in order to like evaluate some business logic that sits behind this Nest application. In Nest, we are calling them controllers. Basically, controllers are responsible for handling incoming requests and returning responses to clients, right? The controller might be a like entry point, considered as a microservice, it might be a REST API, it might be just a handler over some transfer layer. Providers remains the same. So we have classes, injectable decorators, factories, values, imports, again the same, nothing has changed. List of modules that has to that actually define the API of the module. And the last property, exports. And let's stop here for a moment. Why do we need exports if we don't have declarations anymore, right? So the reason is that providers in Nest are private by default. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind. Like every provider is encapsulated inside a module unless you explicitly export it, so then it's available for everyone. All right, let's have a look at the code. This is a typical Angular module. It's a class decorated with ng decorator. Since we would like to transform this module into Nest module, we have to change a couple of things. First of all, we must change the decorator because we don't have ng module. Ng prefix is no longer required. Nest is using module decorator to define modules. Then, the second thing, declarations. As I said before, declarations are useless. Instead, we need a way to define controllers. So we can quickly change declarations property to controllers property, and that's it. This is the Nest module. Quite similar, isn't it? So the second building block is a provider. As I said before, provider is an instruction to the dependency injection system on how to obtain a value for dependency. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to show only class providers, but obviously we also provide a way to create a factory, to bind a value directly, and so on and so on. Anyway, let's dive into the code. So this is a typical Angular provider. It's a cut service with injectable decorator on top of it. An HTTP service is a required dependency that should be eventually injected through constructor. Since Angular 6, I believe, we can register providers using provided in attribute. These providers are tree-shakeable, which enables dead code elimination, and lead to a smaller bundle. However, in server-side applications, we don't care about bundle that much. It might be useful in many cases, and in serverless, for example, to make your code start faster, but normally it's not that crucial. So we can remove this property, and this is a Nest provider. So totally equivalent to this one available in Angular. Third element, guards. In Angular, guards control the router behavior. You can easily determine whether the navigation process should continue or not. And Angular provides us with a set of useful decorators like can activate, can deactivate, can activate child. So in order to allow user to proceed to some route in case of can activate guard, every guard would have to return true value. For example, authentication guard, permissions guard, and so on and so on. Okay, let's switch to the server side now. User does not fit here. That's the first thing. But we have a notion of our request. So we have an incoming request to our application, and we have to decide whether this request should be able to proceed to a certain endpoint, to a route. So before the request may hit this endpoint, every guard should check, let's say like headers, for example, or maybe permissions of the user, and then depending on those values, decide, can you proceed or not? Okay, API. That's the authentication guard, typical authentication guard in Angular. It implements can activate interface, it has an injectable decorator, and then we have obviously can activate method. And the can activate has a list of parameters, respectively activated snapshot and router state snapshot. However, in server-side applications, we don't need both of them. Instead, we need something that supplies us with information about the incoming request. Hence, in Nest applications, we have execution context. Execution context contains information about requests, contains information about method that is going to be evaluated once we return true value. So we can create reusable guards and depending on the routes, apply different permissions, for example. And the last element that I'm going to talk about are interceptors. Interceptors allow you to inspect and transform HTTP requests from your application to server. Now, same interceptors may enhance incoming response to you from your server-side application on the way back. So let's have a look at the diagram. Client performs a request to the remote resource. The remote responds with an answer, let's say with a JSON payload. And interceptors may enhance outgoing requests as well as incoming requests. So that was Angular part. Let's have a look at the next part right now. We are at the opposite side of the diagram. Think about it like a flip side of a coin. The flow is almost the same. We have our request, which goes to the handler. So the client performs, let's say Angular application performs our request. We need to reply, send our response from our controller. And interceptors may enhance incoming request, not outgoing request, and outgoing response, not incoming response. So that's the difference. All right, I could talk about many different elements, like pipes. We also have pipes. I could talk about GraphQL, Swagger, CLI a lot. We have many different things, microservices, but we don't have enough time for that. So I'm going to move to the most important parts just to, do not make it too long. So let's do a small recap. In fact, it all boils down to reusability. In a few minutes, developer with Angular experience is able to start working with Nest with understanding the majority of the most relevant features of the framework, like modules, providers, guards, interceptors, and so on and so on. Knowledge of the API gives huge benefits and allows you to rapidly enter the world of server-side applications with a minimum effort. But I haven't said everything yet. So for us, developer workload is also very important when working on a large product. And thus we have created Nest CLI. And Nest CLI is heavily inspired by Angular as well. It's not that powerful yet, but exposes a few essential commands like nest new to quickly scaffold your project, or nest generate to generate building blocks easily from your command line. And guess what? This Nest CLI is based on Angular, like excellent Angular schematics. And Nest has a dedicated Nest.js schematics package, which is used by the Nest CLI underneath. So you can easily create your own schematics in your organization if you want to. Also, you can use those schematics, Nest.js schematics, within an ng CLI. So you can use like ng-generate Nest.js schematics and generate a provider using Nest schematics, not Angular schematics. Okay, before the end of this talk, I would like to share a few latest announcements. So first of all, we've been getting a lot of questions. How can I serve my Angular application through Nest application? So think about Nest as a server that serves Angular application. So what you can do now, you can use Nest application, you can generate Angular application, and it's gonna like scaffold the whole Angular application within Nest application and automatically create a module that is gonna serve this application through Node application. Then easily, once you like evaluate this single command, you can deploy your application to Heroku, for instance, without any boilerplate code. Like you have everything out of the box. And this is how the import statement looks like. This is Nest module, not Angular module. And Nest module imports Angular module, applies some configuration properties, and that's it. Nothing else. And it works well with both Fastify and Express. The second thing, Angular Universal. So Angular Universal is amazing because it allows you to have a great SEO, you have a better performance, right? But it's slightly confusing. Like in the official Angular documentation, you have this huge boilerplate code written in Express. It's not very understandable for people coming from the front-end world. So what you can do with Nest right now, let's say you can create a new Angular application, let's say server-side rendered application, and then you can call ng-add Nest.js ng-universal, and that's it. You have an Angular Universal application that is using Nest to serve your Angular app without any boilerplate code. And how it looks like. So this is at the right side, you have an Angular application. You can change something within the component. It's gonna live reload your server-side rendered application immediately, within seconds. Like you can now create server-side rendered apps with the same experience as you would create a normal application. And those applications, this Angular application is served through Nest, which means that you can also build your API at the same time. Once you change something in the API, it's gonna reload your Angular application, automatically refresh the browser, server-side render Angular application, and fetch the data again. Okay. Lastly, I would like to say that Nest is open source, meaning we are totally driven by the community. And therefore, I encourage everyone who shares similar ideas, who loves Angular, to join this little revolution. We would love for you to contribute to Nest and help it make it even better than it's today. And there are a couple of companies and more than 100 people who decided to support us with their donations already. A big thank you to all of them. Also, if you're looking for official Nest.js consulting, reach us at Trillion.io, which is an official Nest.js consulting, also Angular consulting company. Let us know, send us email, chat with us. Our goal is to help elevate teams. So, yeah. So, thank you for attention. Thank you for having me.